All right, hello wine drinking people. We're here for a special edition of Wine Watch Television. I'd like to welcome one of the top winemakers, not only in California, but in the world today. And I've known Paul for a long time. I'll never forget the first time I talked to you. And it was back in the early 1990s. And the guy that started the store, Jim Turner, called me up one day in a frantic, he was all excited. He just opened up Connoisseur's Guide and he said, "You got to find this guy, Paul Hobbs' wine." He goes, "He just got 3 puffs for his Richard Dinner Vineyard Chardonnay," which is a 100-point score from Connoisseur's Guide. That's their highest rating, 3 puffs. So I proceeded to call up Hillsburg Information, and they gave me the number for Paul Hobbs, and I called it, and lo and behold, Paul picked up the phone. So this is...
Hey, track me down.
A couple of decades later.
A stalker.
And I was just at your winery stalking you in Argentina. You weren't there, but the guys that were there couldn't have said more nicer things about you. And I think people that achieve success a lot of times let it go to their head. And it's amazing how you've managed to stay somewhat humble and level-headed, even with all the success that you've had in the wine business. Numerous 100-point scores from California. Definitely one of the trailblazers in Argentina. When you're working at Mondavi Winery as a lab rat in the 80s, that's where Nicholas Catena found you, and he said, "I need to bring someone from this winery back with me because these guys are doing some really exciting stuff." You think about all the people that went through the school of Robert Mondavi. You had Warren Winarski, you had Mike Gergich, you had Zelma Long.
That's right.
I mean, some of the top names in California.
Yeah. They were a breeding ground for a lot of great winemakers.
The real thing that it takes to make great wines is great vineyard sites, and this is the one thing that you've got everywhere where you're doing business is some of the top vineyards.
Basically, what I focused on from the beginning is single vineyard or vineyard resident wines, and all the wines we're going to taste today. We have 4 Pinot Noirs from our estates, but basically all these are fermented with indigenous yeast, so I'm not adding any cultured yeast. And there's no fining or filtration, and that's something I've worked hard to develop.
To me, I always tell people Pinot Noir is the ultimate expression of terroir. Is that why you picked these 4 wines to showcase what's different about these different vineyard sites?
Yeah, Pinot really does. It's so elegant and delicate that it really does such a great job, I think. So yes, that's why we did that. In our first glass, we have all these wines, save one, are from the Russian River district of Sonoma County. That area is influenced strongly by maritime, the fog, the Pacific Ocean, cooling the vineyards. And the Russian River is a channel as well as Bodega Bay. So that's the first wine. It's
a blend of several different vineyards in the Russian
River. Like an appellation blend, not a single. So this has several of our estates and also a couple of growers that we've worked with for quite some time. In this case, this is a more, the wine is driven more by fruit, less oak, but also great acidity, because some of the vineyards here are in very, very cold areas.
So the second one, the Hyde.
This is a famous vineyard planted in the Carneros by Larry Hyde and sons, his sons Peter and Chris, and his wife Beta from Poland. They met, as a matter of fact. He was intern at Domaine de la Romanée-Conti in France as an intern, and so was his wife. And so they met there, married, came back. He worked for Joseph Phelps for a few years and then bought his own property. But truly in his heart, he's like a Burgundian vigneron.
It's definitely got a little more richness to it, to me, on the nose. It's got a little bit of an animal character to it, too.
Well, Hyde Vineyard is the warmest site. It's also on the heaviest soils because that region tends to be more what are heavier clays or even dark gray clays. The soils are not particularly deep, so the roots only are shallow rooted. And yet it has a classic Pinot Noir quality. It's our earliest ripening vineyard. It's always silky tannin. It's the silkiest of all the Pinot Noirs that we make, and more plush, if you will, on the palate. In the terms of the oak, it'll have more oak, for example, than the Russian River. Then the third glass, we have Catherine Lindsay Estate. This is my first estate vineyard, and where we have Paul Hobbs Winery situated. And this was a 19-acre parcel that was quite interesting in the Russian River. Is a sub-series of soils called Sebastopol. We're in the town of Sebastopol. And these are gray and red clays, which means the red, of course, comes from iron with a lot of pebble. And this is in the coolest site at the Lindsay Estate, which is a bit lower, and it has a lot of cobble and pebble. And this is a beautiful wine, I think.
And that minerality gets transmitted into the wine where you have more of that. Yeah.
Precisely. You can taste that, and also you can get some of the red clays and it's named after my great-grandmother who founded our homestead farm in New York in the mid-1800s. Now my older brother, the fourth generation, is running that farm, and basically I wanted to honor her on the West Coast for what she started in New York. This is mostly a selection of grapes of Pinot Noir that's called Calera, and this was a derivative of some of the Domaine de la Ronde-Conti vineyards. And then finally we have Valdez. Ulysses is basically started a farming company. He worked in Healdsburg and worked his way up from nothing, basically. And then when the owner of that property or that company wanted to retire, he asked Ulysses if he would take over the company.
Yeah, these wines age very well too. I can tell you, I've had several older vintages of Pinot Noirs from you, and yeah, 5-10 years, no problem on these wines in the cellar. And I think that goes to say volumes about these wines are balanced. And a lot of people look at California wines and they say, well, if they're so alcoholic, how are they going to age? How can they have balance? Well, when you pick the wines when they're perfectly ripe, the wine is going to have balance. You don't have to add acid to it. You don't have to add sugar to it.
I think that's the key right there, because you know, you talk about 12.5, you talk about 13.5 or 14.5, and I like this whole conversation about alcohol should just go away. It's all about balance.
Yeah. Do you have to add sugar to your wine? No, you have to add acid. Do you have to add acid?
We're not doing that as they do in some parts of the world.
Yeah.
But also we don't have to add acid in most vintages.
Yeah.
We're looking for sites that we achieve, and also the way we grow the grapes, so we achieve the balance in the grape without having to do anything to it when it comes to the winery.
And I've had
That's our
winemakers
ideal
tell me
objective.
their best wines were the ones they had to do very little to. Because
Well,
once
that
when you
is-
get great fruit, that you don't need to manipulate it.
I think that's true of almost everything, right?
Yeah.
When you have something great, whether it's in food or wine or any raw material that is at the highest level, working with it is quite easy.
You just don't want to screw it up.
Pretty much. Pretty
All right.
much.
Well, thank you very much, Paul, for coming out today.
Andrew, a
Really
pleasure.
appreciate it. It's
Thank
always
you.
great to see you. Great
Likewise.
stuff. Lampisoni signing off for the Wine Watch, saying remember, always drink the good stuff first.